That night, the fire was burning low. I thought I was alone in my cabin by the lake, but the door crashed open, and she barged in. Karen, the HOA queen of our neighborhood, with police officers behind her and fury in her eyes. She pointed at me, shouting that I had to leave. She thought she had all the power, but what she didn't know was that someone else was already sitting inside the cabin, watching silently. Someone who could end her reign forever. Welcome to the HOA Society, where we bring you the wildest, strangest, and most unbelievable HOA stories from across the suburbs. My name is Daniel. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. I'm just an ordinary homeowner who bought a small place by the lake to escape the madness of the HOA board. I work a regular job, I pay my dues, and I just wanted peace. But when Karen, the president of our HOA, followed me all the way to my cabin, I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, like the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. I stared at Karen, standing in the doorway with her perfect hair and her ugly rage. Behind her were two police officers, young guys. They looked bored, maybe even a little embarrassed to be there. But Karen, she didn't notice that. She was too busy pointing at me, yelling about rules that didn't even exist. "You are out of compliance," she screamed. Her voice cracked on the word compliance, like she had practiced it 100 times in the mirror. "This cabin, this property, it is under HOA regulation, and you have broken the rules." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat in my chair, staring at the fire, letting her anger bounce off the wooden walls. Karen hated silence. She needed noise. She needed control, so she raised her voice even louder. "You can't stay here. You need to pack your things and leave this property now." The officers shifted their weight, their boots heavy against the floorboards. They didn't say anything, but I could feel their eyes on me. They were waiting to see what I would do. Would I fight? Would I obey? But I only smiled inside, because I knew something Karen didn't. She wasn't the most powerful person in this room, even though she thought she was. I looked at her carefully. Her cream-colored pantsuit, her nails sharp and painted red, her face pulled tight with fake confidence. She thought this cabin was hers to conquer. But it wasn't. It was mine. And I had someone sitting inside who made Karen look like a child throwing a tantrum. She didn't notice the woman in the corner. She didn't notice the calm figure sitting quietly in a chair near the window. Karen was too blinded by her own performance to realize she had an audience. The woman hadn't moved since Karen stormed in, her legs crossed neatly, her dark suit catching just enough light from the fire to make her look powerful without speaking. Her eyes, sharp and cold, followed every word that came out of Karen's mouth, like a predator watching prey dance around before the strike. But Karen kept going. She pulled out papers from her bag, slammed them down on the table in front of me. "These are legal notices," she snapped. "Violation after violation. Fines stacked against you. You cannot stay here." The papers slid across the wood, but I didn't touch them. I didn't even look at them. I knew they were worthless. Just more of her homemade threats printed on cheap paper. She leaned closer, her perfume strong, her finger jabbing the air between us. "You think you can hide here? You think the rules don't apply to you? Not in my HOA." I almost laughed. Her HOA. That's what she always called it. Like she had written the rules herself. Like she was queen of every mailbox, every driveway, every blade of grass in our neighborhood. The officers finally spoke. "Ma'am," one of them said softly, "maybe we should..." But Karen spun around and cut him off. "Stay out of this. This is a violation of HOA law, and I am here to enforce it. HOA law." She actually said it. Like she thought her powers stretched further than the state, further than the real courts. The fire popped behind me and I almost smiled, because I knew the real law was already in the room. The woman in the corner shifted. Just slightly. Karen didn't notice. Not yet. She was too busy lecturing, pacing across the cabin floor like she was on stage. I wondered for a moment how far she would go. Would she try to drag me out herself? Would she call for backup? Would she collapse when she finally realized she wasn't in control? Karen had spent years terrorizing our neighborhood, measuring lawns with a ruler, leaving nasty notes taped to doors. fining families for things like leaving a bike in the driveway. She called it keeping standards high. But everyone else called it harassment. And now she had chased me all the way out here, to a cabin that was never under her control. But she didn't care about truth. She only cared about winning. I leaned back in my chair, letting the fire warm my face. I looked at her and finally spoke. "Are you sure you're the one in charge here?" The words froze her for a moment. Her eyes narrowed. Her lips tightened. And for the first time all night, she looked unsure. But she recovered quickly, shaking her head. "Of course I am in charge," she snapped. "I am the HOA president. And nobody defies me." Her voice echoed off the wooden walls. The officers looked away, like they were embarrassed to even be part of this, and in the corner, the silent woman finally uncrossed her legs. Karen didn't notice the movement, but I did, and my heart started to beat faster, not with fear, but with anticipation, because soon, very soon, Karen was going to learn the truth, and when she did, the look on her face would be worth every second of this nightmare. I turned my gaze back to the fire. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to argue. All I had to do was wait. The room 5 felt like it was holding its breath. The fire cracked softly. The officers shifted on their feet. And Karen still thought she was in control. She kept pacing, her heels clicking hard against the old cabin floor. She waved her arms like she was conducting an orchestra, except the music was only her own voice, shrill and endless. "You can't fight this," she said. "You will never win against the HOA." She slammed her hand against the wall. Dust fell from the log beams above. The officers exchanged looks, but stayed quiet. And then, a sound broke through her rant, a chair sliding slowly across the floor. Karen froze. Her eyes darted toward the corner. The woman was standing now, calm, deliberate. Her dark suit caught the glow of the fire, sharp edges of authority in every line. Her hair was neat, her face cold but confident. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the cabin like thunder without sound. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, she was speechless. The woman stepped closer, heels clicking softer, steadier. She looked at the officers first. They stiffened like soldiers at attention. Then she looked at me and gave the slightest nod. Finally, her gaze locked on Karen. Her voice was low, measured, but it cut sharper than any scream. "I am the State Attorney General." The words dropped like stones into the silence. The fire hissed as if it had heard too. Karen blinked, then laughed nervously, a fake laugh. Shaky, desperate. "No, you're not," she said. "This is a trick. You're just another neighbor siding with him." The woman didn't flinch. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a badge. She held it up, the gold seal catching the firelight. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a game. Karen's laugh died instantly. Her lips trembled as her eyes locked onto that seal. The officers straightened, their hands resting against their belts. They knew exactly what it meant. The woman stepped closer. "You have entered this property illegally," she said. "You have made false claims, and you have used law enforcement for your personal harassment." Karen shook her head quickly. No, you don't understand. I was only—" "Silence," the woman interrupted. Her tone was flat, final, like a gavel slamming down in court. Karen's words died in her throat. The officers looked at each other again. One of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said softly to the attorney, "do you want us to remove her?" Karen spun around in panic. "Remove me? You can't remove me. I'm the HOA president." Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. The attorney's eyes narrowed. She didn't raise her voice, but somehow the air grew heavier. "You are not above the law," she said. "Not here. Not anywhere." Karen tried to argue again, her hands shaking now. She pulled the papers back from the table and waved them in the air. "These are violations. He's in violation of HOA code." The attorney took one step forward. Her hand moved slowly, deliberately. She plucked the papers out of Karen's grip and held them up to the firelight. Her eyes scanned the words. Her lips tightened into something close to a smirk. Then she looked back at Karen. "These are meaningless," she said. "Not worth the paper they are printed on." Karen's face turned red, her chest heaving. She wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to being powerless, but tonight, every ounce of her control was slipping away. The attorney let the papers drop onto the table. The firelight flickered across her face, calm, unshaken. She looked at me again. "You don't need to worry," she said. "This property is outside their jurisdiction." Karen gasped. No, everything is under my jurisdiction. I decide what happens here." Her words sounded weaker now, hollow, like even she didn't believe them anymore. The officers shifted again. This time, they took a step closer to Karen. Her eyes widened. She stumbled back against the wall. Her hands shook as she tried to grab her purse, but the attorney's voice stopped her cold. "You have. He abused your position," she said. "You have harassed your neighbors, falsified notices, and wasted police resources." Her eyes glinted hard in the firelight. "And tonight, you crossed a line." Karen's breathing grew heavy, her chest rising and falling fast. She looked at me with hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You don't know who you're dealing with." But the truth was clear. We all knew who she was, and for the first time, it didn't matter. The attorney turned to the officers. "Escort her out," she said firmly. They nodded without hesitation. Karen tried to resist. She pulled her arm back, shouted about rights and power. But her voice was just noise now. The officers guided her toward the door, her heels scraping against the floor. The cabin grew quieter with every step she took, until finally, the door slammed shut behind her. Silence again, only the fire crackling, only the smell of pine and smoke in the air. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. The attorney turned toward me. Her expression softened slightly. "You won't be bothered again," she said. "I'll make sure of it." I nodded, my eyes still on the fire. It was strange. For years, Karen had ruled our neighborhood like a dictator, and in one night, she had been reduced to nothing. But deep inside, I wondered, would she really give up? Or would she come back even angrier, more desperate, more dangerous? Because people like Karen, they don't go quietly, they fight, even when the battle is already lost. The cabin was quiet again. The fire burned steady. The smell of smoke and pine filled the air, but the silence didn't feel safe anymore. It felt heavy, unsettled. The Attorney General stayed for a few minutes longer. She gathered the useless papers Karen had left behind, folded them neatly, and slipped them into her briefcase. Evidence now, not trash. Her calm voice cut through the quiet. "I'll open a file on her," she said. "She won't be able to hide behind that HOA title anymore." I nodded, but my mind wasn't calm. I had seen Karen's eyes as she was dragged out. Those eyes weren't beaten. They were burning, and I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. The Attorney General must have seen the doubt in my face. "Stay here tonight," she told me. "Lock your doors. Don't answer if she comes back. I'll handle the rest." Her words were strong, final. But once she left the cabin and the sound of her car faded into the night, I was alone again, and loneliness has a way of making every shadow feel alive. I sat by the fire, staring into the flames. I tried to let the heat calm me, but in my head, I replayed everything. Karen's voice, her anger, her obsession with control. She had followed me all the way here, into the woods, and I couldn't stop thinking. How far would she go next time? The crack of a branch outside made me jump. I told myself it was only the wind, only an animal passing by. But my hand tightened around the arm of the chair, because what if it wasn't? I walked to the window. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm, endless. But the tree line across the water looked darker than usual, like it was hiding something, or someone. I kept staring, waiting to see movement, but nothing came. I told myself I was safe, that the Attorney General had scared her off, that Karen wouldn't dare come back. But I knew better. Karen didn't let go. She didn't forgive. And she never forgot. The next morning, the world looked brighter. The sun stretched across the lake. The birds sang. The kind of peace I came here for. But peace is fragile when your enemy knows where you are. I stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the crisp air. That's when I saw it. A note, taped to the wooden railing. My stomach sank before I even touched it. The handwriting was sharp, aggressive, unmistakable. Karen's, The note was short. "You think you won, but this is my neighborhood. I'll be back." I crumpled the paper in my hand, anger rising inside me. How had she slipped back here so quickly? Had she been watching the cabin all night? Had she waited for the Attorney General to leave? The thought made my skin crawl. The woods suddenly felt too close, too quiet. I scanned the tree line again, but saw nothing. Only silence. But silence wasn't comfort anymore. It was threat. I thought about calling the Attorney General, but what would I say? That Karen left me a note? It sounded petty, small, but in my gut, I knew it was more than a note. It was a warning, a promise. I burned the paper in the fireplace, watched the flames curl around her words until nothing remained but ash. But even as the smoke rose, the words stayed in my mind. By evening, I was restless. I checked the locks 3 times. I closed every curtain. I sat in my chair again, watching the fire, waiting. But waiting for what? My phone buzzed. A message from a neighbor back in town. "Did you hear? Karen called an emergency HOA meeting." Of course she did. She couldn't stand losing. So she was already rewriting the story, probably telling everyone I had broken laws, that the Attorney General was a fake, that she had been ambushed. I could almost hear her voice spreading lies across the neighborhood. And the worst part? Some of them would believe her. That's what Karen was best at. Not rules, not laws, but manipulation. She knew how to twist words until they bent her way. The fire crackled louder as I leaned forward. I knew I couldn't just sit here and hope she stopped, because Karen never stopped. She would push and push until something snapped. The question was, what would snap first? Her power or my patience? That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every creak in the cabin made my eyes shoot open. Every sound outside made me hold my breath. At one point, I swore I heard footsteps on the porch. I sat up in bed, listening, heart pounding. But when I checked, nothing was there. Still, I left the light on, because dark felt too dangerous now. Days passed. The Attorney General sent me updates. Small wins. She filed official complaints, launched an investigation. Karen was under scrutiny now, but scrutiny didn't scare her. It only made her louder. Neighbors texted me. "She's going door to door. She's saying you bribed the Attorney General. She's calling you a criminal." Her lies spread like wildfire. And even out here at the cabin, I could feel the flames creeping closer. I chopped wood one afternoon to clear my head. The sound of the axe striking was sharp, almost violent, and with every swing I thought about her. Her smirk, her voice, her heels echoing through the cabin, and that note, "I'll be back." I told myself I wouldn't break, that I had the law on my side now. But law moves slow, and Karen moves fast, as the sun dipped behind the trees. I sat on the porch again. The lake turned gold. The sky painted itself in fire. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't, because all I could think about was her, out there somewhere, plotting, waiting. And then, the thought hit me. What if she wasn't planning to come back alone? What if next time, she brought the entire HOA board with her? What if she turned my neighbors against me completely? The fireflies blinked in the shadows. The woods whispered with night sounds, but none of it calmed me, because Karen wasn't just fighting me anymore. She was fighting to keep her throne, and people like her, they fight dirty. The note burned, the ashes gone, but her shadow was still here with me. Karen wasn't finished. I knew at the moment I heard she called that emergency HOA meeting. She had lost once, humiliated in front of the state attorney general. But humiliation doesn't end people like her. It fuels them. Neighbors started calling me. One by one, some whispered like they were afraid someone might hear them. "She's telling everyone you forged documents. She said the attorney general is your cousin. She claims you're trying to destroy the HOA from within." I listened quietly, because what else could I do? Karen was building a story, and like always, she was the hero, in her version. The funny part was, I wasn't even in town. I was still at the cabin, chopping wood, staring at the lake, trying to breathe. But even from here, I could feel the pressure rising back in the neighborhood, like a storm gathering over cul-de-sacs and mailbox rows. I knew her playbook. First, she spreads fear. Then, she calls the board together. Finally, she votes on punishment, and if she couldn't punish me in court, she would punish me in every other way she could. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Paul, one of the quieter neighbors. He never got involved in HOA drama, too busy with his kids, too tired from work, but his text was short, urgent. "You need to see this meeting. She's making moves." My stomach sank. I opened the live stream link. Yes, Karen had actually set up a live stream. Her face filled the screen, framed by the HOA banner she loved too much. Her voice was sharp, commanding, fake confidence dripping from every word. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face a serious threat to our community." She paused, letting her eyes scan the room like a politician. "One of our own has betrayed the trust of this neighborhood." She didn't say my name at first, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. The camera panned across the room. Some faces looked confused, some angry, some bored, but nobody dared interrupt her. She slammed a stack of papers on the podium. "These are violations," she declared. "Proof that this homeowner has ignored our rules again and again." I leaned closer to the screen. It was the same fake paperwork she had tried to shove at me in the cabin, the same nonsense the Attorney General had already dismissed, but in Karen's hands, it was a weapon again. She raised her voice, and when confronted, he attacked the integrity of this board. Her hand pressed to her chest like she was the victim. He even dragged state officials into our private community matters. The crowd murmured, some heads nodded. Fear spread faster than truth ever could. I clenched my fists watching it. She wasn't just fighting me anymore, she was rewriting history. She pointed at the board members lined up behind her. "We cannot let this continue. We must act. We must protect our neighborhood." And then, the vote, on live camera, she proposed stripping me of every right in the HOA fines, bans, even an attempt to block me from selling my house in the future. It was madness. But the scary part? The board nodded along. Some raised their hands, others looked too scared to resist. In one night, she turned my neighborhood into a courtroom, and me into the villain. I slammed my laptop shut. The fire crackled louder. Almost mocking me, I paced the cabin floor, my mind racing. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was war. I grabbed my phone and called the Attorney General. She picked up on the second ring, her voice steady, controlled. "I saw the broadcast," she said before I could even speak. "She's digging her own grave. Let her keep going." But how could I just sit and wait? My name was being dragged through mud. My neighbors were swallowing her lies, and worse. Some were starting to believe them. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the cabin creak. Every sound made me think of Karen's voice. Every shadow felt like her eyes watching me. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit back anymore. If Karen wanted war, I'd give her one, but not on her terms, not with shouting or fake fines. No, I would play her game, the game of compliance. I started making lists. Every rule in the HOA handbook, every petty guideline she ever enforced, mailbox paint color, lawn length, trash can placement, all of it if she wanted to play queen. I would make her drown in her own rules, one violation at a time, documented, photographed, delivered to the very people she thought she controlled. I smiled to myself as I thought about it. Karen had spent years fining others for leaving Christmas lights up too long, but I had photos of her own light. It's still hanging in February. She fined kids for chalk drawings on sidewalks, but I remembered her own grandchildren scribbling outside her driveway one summer. She wanted to play perfect. I would show everyone how imperfect she really was. The thought gave me energy. For the first time since she stormed my cabin, I felt control again. The Attorney General would handle the legal fight. But me? I would handle the neighborhood. Still, a small part of me wondered, how far would she go when she realized she was losing again? Would she scream louder? Would she threaten me face to face? Would she snap completely? Because Karen wasn't just a woman with rules, she was a woman addicted to power. And when addicts lose their fix, they get dangerous. I looked at the lake, calm under the morning sun. I wondered how long that calm would last, because storms always return. and Karen was the storm in human form. The plan was set in my mind. Revenge by compliance. Her own rules turned against her. I thought it would buy me time, give me the upper hand, but Karen wasn't one to wait quietly while someone else moved the pieces. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening. I was chopping wood by the lake when I heard the sound of tires on gravel, a slow crawl, headlights bouncing through the trees. I froze, the axe heavy in my hand. The car stopped at the edge of my cabin driveway. The lights stayed on, shining straight into the windows, but nobody got out. I stood there in the dark, watching. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the car reversed and drove away. No plates I could see, no faces I could make out. But I didn't need a face. I already knew who sent them. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps on the porch. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper of warning. Karen wasn't done with me. She was just getting started. The next morning I found another note, this one wedged under, or the porch mat, the same sharp handwriting, angry letters pressed deep into the paper. You can't run forever. We are watching. We, not I. She wasn't alone anymore. The board was with her. I burned the note like the last one. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like fuel on the fire she was building. Back in town, neighbors sent more messages. Karen's been walking the streets every night with a flashlight. She says she's inspecting homes for violations. She keeps bringing up your name. It was spreading. My name wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a weapon. She was using it to scare others into obedience. If they didn't follow her rules, they'd end up like me, targeted, shamed, dragged through fake charges. I opened my HOA handbook again that night. Every rule looked like a blade in her hands. Mailbox paint, lawn edges, even bird feeders. But instead of fear, I felt something else, determination. I started documenting. Photos of her mailbox, rusted at the bottom, pictures of her lawn, grass too long by exactly 2 inches, screenshots of her lights left on past midnight. Every tiny violation, written down and stored away, if she wanted war. I would give her one made of paper, one that even she couldn't escape. But she didn't wait for me to strike. She struck first. It was midnight when I heard the knock, not gentle, not polite, a hard pounding that shook the door on its hinges. I grabbed a flashlight and crept forward. "Who's there?" I called out. No answer, just silence. I flicked the light through the window, and there they were. 3 figures standing at the edge of the porch. Not Karen, not directly, but board members. Her loyal soldiers. I recognized them instantly. Mrs. Thompson from 2 streets over, always complaining about kids riding bikes too fast. Mr. Blake, the one who fined his own neighbor for painting his fence without permission, and another man I barely knew. But his HOA badge gleamed in the light. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they just stood there, watching, like scarecrows planted in the night. My chest tightened. I called out again. "What do you want?" Finally, Mr. Blake stepped forward. His voice was low, heavy. "You've brought trouble on yourself. Karen warned you. This is your last chance. Comply, or things will get worse." And then, just like that, they turned and walked into the woods. No car, no flashlights, nothing. Just shadows disappearing into darker shadows. I locked every door twice that night, but locks don't stop fear from crawling into your mind. The next morning, another message popped up from Paul. "You need to be careful. Karen's rallying the whole board against you. She says you're a danger to the community." Danger, that was her new word. She wasn't just painting me as a rule breaker anymore. She was painting me as a threat. And threats, people want to remove completely. The Attorney General called later that day. She sounded calm, but firm. "Don't engage with them directly," she said. "Let me build the case. The more they do, the worse it will be for them." Her words made sense. But sense doesn't calm a racing heart at night, because the board didn't fight in daylight. They fought in whispers, in shadows, in knocks on doors. That weekend I drove back into town quietly. I wanted to see with my own eyes what Karen was doing. What I saw made my stomach twist. Signs, real signs, posted at the entrance of the neighborhood. "Protect our community. Stop dangerous behavior." No names written, but everyone knew who they meant. Kids rode past on bikes. Parents whispered as they walked, and Karen stood in the middle of it all like a mayor in her own kingdom, smiling, shaking hands, spreading poison with every word. I stayed hidden in my truck, watching from a distance. I wanted to confront her, scream the truth, show everyone the lies, but I knew it wouldn't work. Not yet. Not until the Attorney General finished her work, not until my compliance plan was ready. So I drove back to the cabin, my mind burning hotter than the fire waiting for me inside. This wasn't just about rules anymore. This was about survival, because Karen wasn't trying to find me anymore. She was trying to erase me, and deep inside, I wondered, how far would she really go? Would she just keep spreading lies? Or would she push until something truly dangerous happened? Because when people are desperate to keep power, they don't stop at paper and meetings. Sometimes, they turn to darker things. The nights grew heavier after that visit on my porch. Every sound outside made me freeze. Every shadow felt alive. I kept the lights on late, the fire burning hotter than usual, but even firelight couldn't push away the feeling that something was closing in. Karen wasn't stopping. She was building, each day. More whispers from neighbors, each night. More strange noises in the woods. It started small. Trash cans tipped over near my driveway, scratch marks on my mailbox, a smear of mud across my cabin window. But each time, no one in sight. I knew what it was. Psychological warfare. She wanted me rattled, restless, broken down before the real strike came. And it was working. By the third night, I was pacing the cabin floor like a prisoner, checking the locks over and over, peering through curtains at the dark tree line. My axe leaned by the door now, not for wood, but for defense. Then came the breaking point. It was 2 a.m. when the sound hit, glass shattering. I bolted upright, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The cabin window had exploded inward. Shards scattered across the floor, cold air rushed in, and outside, laughter. Not kids, not random strangers. Laughter I knew too well. Karen, I rushed to the window. In the moonlight I saw them. 4 figures running back toward the woods, one short, one tall, 2 carrying flashlights, and in the middle, that unmistakable blonde hair bouncing as she turned her head back and laughed. She had finally crossed the line. I grabbed my phone and dialed the Attorney General. Her voice was groggy but sharp when she answered. I told her everything. Shoo. It didn't sound surprised. She's desperate, she said. She knows her control is slipping. This is her last weapon, fear. But I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was angry. The next day I drove back into town. I wanted to see her face, to see if she would hide, or if she'd smirk like nothing happened. And of course, she was smirking, standing at the entrance of the neighborhood again, clipboard in hand, barking orders at board members like soldiers, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just smashed my window hours before. I parked my truck a block away and walked closer. My blood boiled with every step. She spotted me before I spoke. Her smile faltered, just for a second, then it came back, wider, faker. Well, look who crawled back, she said loudly. Neighbors turned their heads, curious. She wanted an audience. You broke into my property, I said flatly. Her eyes widened, but her mouth didn't stop. I don't know what you're talking about, she laughed. Maybe you should take better care of your cabin. Sounds like it's falling apart. The board chuckled nervously. She fed off it, like a stage actress feeding on applause. I wanted to shout, wanted to call her a liar in front of everyone, but something inside me whispered, wait, let her hang herself deeper. The Attorney General's voice echoed in my head. She's digging her own grave. So I didn't fight back. Not then, not there. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said quietly, you don't know what's coming. Her smile twitched, but she recovered. Oh, I know exactly what's coming, she snapped back. Your removal, your humiliation, your end. The crowd gasped softly. She thrived on it. I turned and walked away. Her voice followed me down the street. Run back to your little cabin. The HOA owns you. Her words echoed in my ears long after I drove away. Back at the cabin, the smashed glass was still scattered across the floor. I left it there for now, a reminder of what she was capable of, and of what I needed to do next. I called the Attorney General again. This time, her tone was firm, decisive. It's time. I'll be moving forward with charges, harassment, trespassing, destruction of property. She's crossed every line. Finally, some light breaking through the storm, but light doesn't stop a storm immediately, and Karen wasn't slowing down. If anything, she was preparing something bigger. 2 days later, Paul texted again. "You should see this. HOA emergency patrol tonight. They're calling it community safety." Community safety. I almost laughed at the irony, because what it really meant was Karen's army marching through the streets with flashlights, pretending to keep order, while spreading fear. I didn't go into town that night, but Paul sent photos, a group of them in matching jackets, Karen in the lead, like a general marching her troops. Neighbors watched from windows. Kids clutched tighter to their parents' sides. Karen wasn't just fighting me anymore. She was building a cult, and cult leaders. They never stop on their own. They only stop when someone tears them down completely. That thought kept me awake again, staring at the ceiling, listening for the next knock, wondering what her final move would be. Would she send more board members to my cabin? Would she try another break-in? Or would she push so far that even her loyal soldiers turned against her? Because power built on fear always cracks eventually. The only question was, when? The cabin felt like it had lived 1,000 long nights since Karen first stormed in. The fire burned low now. Embers like small, watchful eyes. I could still feel the weight of the board's stare, the echo of her laugh in the trees. But tonight, something had to end. I woke early, before the sun pushed the dark away. My hands shook as I made coffee, the mug rattling in my fingers. I stared at the window until the sky lightened enough to see the lake surface glow. The Attorney General had promised action, but promises move like summer traffic. Shake is slow and heavy, so I could not only wait, I had to be ready. A car rolled up the gravel road around noon. My heart jumped into my throat, then sank when I saw who stepped out. The Attorney General walked up the path with quiet steps, a small team with her. 2 officers and a woman with a camera for documentation. She smiled briefly at me, not the smile of relief, the smile of someone who had seen this kind of ugliness before and would not be fooled by it again. "Ready," she said simply. I nodded, the muscles in my jaw tense. We drove into town together. The neighborhood had the strange hush of people waiting for something to break. I walked the sidewalk and saw faces that used to greet me, turned away now, or looking at me with thin pity. Karen stood at the entrance like a queen waiting for coronation, clipboard in hand, phone in the other, lashings of perfume that hit you from a distance. She looked smaller in daylight than she did at night, and still she smiled like a shark before the bite. The Attorney General moved toward the community hall where Karen had staged so many of her dramas. She didn't push. She just stood and waited for the right moment to step in. Karen spotted her, and the smile faltered for the first time since the storm began. "You need to stop this," the Attorney General said quietly, but the hall heard it like thunder. Karen's voice rose. The crowd leaned in to drink every accusation and every tear she could pour into the room. She named me without saying my name. She painted me as a violent man, a liar, a threat, but the Attorney General had already laid out the truth piece by piece behind the scenes. She had witnesses, records, photos, proof that Karen had fabricated notices and used police for petty power plays. This wasn't a confrontation of words anymore. It was a test of facts. Karen lunged for her favorite trick, the gaslight. She called for sympathy. She said the state had no place in their private matters. She shouted that she had the community's best interest at heart. The crowd swayed. Some hearts moved with her passion. Others waited with worry in their eyes. Then the Attorney General asked a question that felt like a blade cutting through cotton. "Who authored these notices?" she asked slowly. Silence followed like an animal that had been waiting for the shot. One by one, the evidence slid onto the table. Emails with timestamps, police logs showing wasted responses, photos of notices with the same ink stamp from Karen's tiny printer. Faces in the room changed color as truth moved across paper and screen. Karen's clutch on the story began to loosen. Her breath shortened. Her hands trembled with a fear I had not seen before. She tried to speak, to turn it back into performance, but the Attorney General was not an audience for her show. The AG spoke plainly about abuse of position, about the misuse of small power to bully people into fear. She spoke about legal consequences, and about the dignity of neighbors who deserve to live without terror. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Their loyalty had been built on Karen's stories and on their own small comforts. But with the facts laid out, cracks started to show. Some whispered apologies, some avoided eye contact. Others looked angry at themselves for standing silent so long. Karen realized the room was changing on her. And for a moment, I saw her truly human. She looked small and raw and terrified. That look hurt more than any insult or threat she had thrown at me. But she had been a storm for years. Storms do not stop because they look vulnerable once. She lashed out then. A new level of fury. She accused me again, called me names, tried to claim the AG was planted or paid off. Her voice grew messy, spilling into rage and desperation. And then she did something that surprised everyone. She charged toward the table, papers flying, and shoved the AG's files to the floor. 2 officers stepped forward. See? The room held its breath. Karen's face was wild now, the mascara running down her cheeks like war paint. I felt the old fear rise in my chest, not for myself, but for what this moment could become. But the Attorney General did not yell or fight back in anger. She kept her hands calm and steady and reached for the papers on the floor, just as officers moved to hold Karen still. "You are under arrest for harassment and destruction of property," the AG said, with a voice that held both authority and sorrow. Karen stared at the officers as if the world around her had betrayed her. The crowd moved like a wave, some gasping, some whispering, some relieved. Her followers in the board looked away, suddenly embarrassed at their role in this mess. They let her out with handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. The sound of that metal clicking felt strangely loud in the room. For a moment she looked back at me through the glass doors, and her face was a map of regret and hate mixed into something raw and human. She mouthed something I couldn't read, and then the doors shut behind her. Silence again. But different now. A soft kind of calm that follows a storm when you finally let out all the wind and rain. People came to me and mumbled apologies or offered weak smiles that tried to be brave. The Attorney General stayed by my side until it all settled. Then she leaned in and said quietly, "You did the right thing. You kept your cool and you documented everything." I thought about the broken window and the smashed glass, and the nights of fear and the notes and the knocks. I thought about how small rules had turned into knives for someone with power and no conscience. And as the crowd thinned and the sun dropped behind the houses in long shadows, I felt a strange tiredness wash over me. Victory tasted like ash and relief mixed together. That night at the cabin, the fire burned warmer than it had. And since the first knock on my door, the embers felt like company rather than watchful eyes. I sat there with my hands folded and let the quiet sink into my bones. But I also knew storms like Karen do not always end with a single arrest. There are hearings and appeals and angry phone calls and maybe cheap online campaigns to smear the truth. The law would move forward, but so would the memory of what happened here. Still, for now, there was peace. Neighbors came by the next day with cookies and awkward hugs and offers to help with repairs. Some brought stories of their own small humiliations at Karen's hands and cried as they told me about fines and letters and nights of shame that finally made sense now that the truth was out. I stood there and listened and felt something change in the neighborhood. Maybe it was the start of healing. Or maybe it was just the quiet before some other small tyrant tried to fill the space she left behind. Either way, I felt tired and a little lighter at the same time. So I will ask you this, and mean it with all the tired hope I have left. If someone in your community was abusing power like Karen did, would you step forward like the Attorney General did? Or would you stay quiet until the storm came to your door? Tell me below. And if you faced something like this, share what you did. The bravest, angriest, or saddest stories are the ones that help us all learn and stand up next time.